Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. I'm Meredith with Madam Diesel, and today we're gonna work on something that I don't usually work on. We're gonna work on a Dodge Sprinter diesel van. Now, I haven't worked automotive in many years. I did start in automotive and eventually work on semi-trucks and stuff like that, so I've certainly been in that industry, but I am not a master automotive technician. This van and some other vehicles that I do work on happen to be, friends who live at the marina. And if it's a diesel and it's something that, they think I can handle, they ask me to help them out. So we're going to look at it's a 2006 Dodge Sprinter. And the main complaint is lack of power and isn't starting or running nicely. So we're going to have to pull out the scanner for this one and, take it on a test drive and see what's going on. Well, it's been several months since I've gotten to use a scanner for anything. So this is a Snap-on Solus Plus. I actually bought it to maintain my own vehicles, and we're going to use it today. Here we go diagnose a van, Fluff. Let's go diagnose a van. Now, the process that I'm going through applies to anything, whether it's industrial, automotive, marine, does not matter. Whether you're using a scanner or not, we're not applying this, but the first thing we need to do is confirm the complaint. So I'm pulling up the codes here. Looks like we've got several codes. And I'm getting ready for a test drive, so we're actually going to delete these codes and see what codes pop up to make sure we're working with current stuff only. One of the first symptoms I'm picking up on as I started this van to hook up the scanner was just how hard it was to start. So I'm going to mentally log that and we'll continue with the test drive. Now, while I'm deleting these, because we're about to take this thing on a test drive. And one of the first things I want to do, this van was particularly hard to start, like harder than normal. So I want to listen to it. It shouldn't have been hard to start, and I don't think it ever has been. I've never heard my friends complain about this thing cranking. Sure enough, once it started once, I should have filmed it for you guys. It started pretty much immediately. But as I rev it up, see if you can hear this. It's certainly not smooth RPM, and I almost hear like whistling, like there's an air leak in the air induction system. So if we're losing boost pressure, that may be one of our boost hoses between like the intercooler or from the intercooler to the engine. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up some live data. In this case, I want to see what the boost pressure is actively doing as I drive. It's going to graph it for us, and then when we get back, we can see what happened. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but something is definitely leaking. We're gonna take it around the block too, but I'm definitely hearing an air leak here, so I'm curious, what my graph is gonna show. So I don't know if you can hear it, but there is definitely the sound of an air leak, and I've got no power, the slightest incline. I'm like pedal to the metal right now, and this thing has very, very limited power. I can hear the turbo spooling, but I can also hear that air leak. Alright, now that we're back from our test drive, I can thumb through the data I got, and sure enough, our boost pressure is not looking normal. So we definitely know we got a problem with the turbo system. Alright, time to move the truck and some of the stuff that's in the way so we can pull the van in. Oakham and I are putting the forklift back, and then we can get started. thing I'm going to do is a visual inspection. And remember how I said I could hear whistling, and the turbo is buried under all this heat shielding. This is, you know, kind of our air cleaner assembly. And in front, I don't know where you can see, let me grab let's see if I can light it up with a flashlight. But in front of the radiator, there's an intercooler. And so what I want to do is look around and see if I can see anything obvious. Because yes, the scanner says there's problems. Now, it said there was an issue with the mass flow air sensor and things like that. However, all that can be affected by the boost. So the primary code that I'm focusing on is the fact that our turbo is not making boost, or our engine is not seeing the boost it should be seeing. So you always want to start out basic. In this case, I want to check the plumbing from the turbo through the intercooler and into the intake, because if there's any holes, loose hoses, anything like that, you know, that would cause a massive loss of power, because this engine depends on the turbo to be able to pull the weight of this van. As I'm looking around, I'm noticing a couple oil leaks, and my charge air hose that comes from the turbo, this black hose up here, is actually somewhat oily. And it's oily on the outside, like oil has leaked out of it and been blown backwards as they drive down the road. So I'm gonna try to get, you know, look down here, but I can't really see the other end of it, so time to go up top now. Looks like our turbo is dry, so that's good. Let's take a look at this charge air hose. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? We'll come back to that in a second. For now, let's take a look at the rest of the stuff. Looks like everything else is looking good. This is the air intake hose on the other side, and we've got some of our sensors, probably a boost sensor, maybe an air intake temperature sensor or something, along with our mass airflow up top. And this hose looks like it's in good shape, not dry rotted. I'm not seeing oil pouring out of anywhere, so I'm not too worried about this side. This side's looking decent. I think I found the problem. That boost hose, come on, you can focus, completely off of our intercooler. The hose clamp has walked its way off, and there's the other end of it coming from the turbo. Let's see if we can zoom in on that. There we go. Now, it's a little bit oily, so we're still going to inspect other things, but that is the loss of our power right there. So let's take a look at this. This is a charge air cooler hose, and it goes from our turbo to our charge air cooler, which is that radiator thing in front of the engine. On a boat, what you're going to see is instead of a radiator, you're going to have another heat exchanger, which is called a charge air cooler. When I'm looking at this, you know, I've got some oil, you know, and that's okay. It's been leaking for quite some time. I don't know if you can see that with my flashlight on. So we're going to clean this up. this is really slippery from all the oil. And this is in fact a bigger size hose. We may order a new one in case it's gotten stretched out. And oil tends to do some weird things to these hoses. They tend to split them. Typically I see like a split along any sort of seams. And that's why I wanted to pull this, was to make sure, you know, we don't have any dry rotting issues. This hose has been on for a while. I think it was at least 4 years ago when I took it off last, when I did the water pump on this van. And so, you know, like, as long as the end isn't still in good shape, you know, we can put this hose back on, at least confirm that that's our only issue. See if the codes, you know, go away and stay away. You know, but if I go to slide it on and it seems real loose, we'll just replace this piece of hose. Again, just like on a boat, I want to check that my clamps are still clamping. And I may replace these anyways. These are actually Mercedes clamps that have been on here since the beginning of time. And, you know, like, if for whatever reason they slipped or broke, you know, they're very oily, which I don't think would cause any issue. But it's kind of odd that, you know, that whole hose managed to work its way off. And so I'll play with these, make sure these are good to go. If they're not, I've got another set and we'll throw it back together. Alright, now that we have this thing fixed, we need to confirm our repair. So what I'm going to go in and do is reset my codes, and we are going to test drive this and see if the automatic symptoms go away. So I'm going to get this thing to connect and we'll start pulling data again. So we're going to pull some live data here and get ready to pull this thing out and give it a test drive. And already just starting this thing up, it started up way easier. I love the live data on this scanner. Let's see. Yeah. Alright, so we're gonna stick it on our boost pressure, and you can see the little dot here, and it's gonna start graphing as I drive. So I'm gonna set you guys down and we'll be back. No check engine lights. We got great performance On hills, flats, I'm seeing the expected values. You know, I can see everything from boost to wastegate function. I think we've got this one in the bag. Alright, we're back home. We've got no check engine lights. This thing sounds 100 times better. And our graph here is very different than the graph you guys initially saw when I first took it on that test drive. So, you know, we're at 0. This line here is 0, and you can see all the kind of boost events. Whenever I was accelerating, you know, working the engine, that's where you see it go up. And then every time I let off on the gas, the engine will pull a vacuum, and that's where you see, you know, the drops. That's when I took my foot off the gas and slowed the van down or something. And so this is the performance that I was hoping to see. And so we're gonna reset any codes, make sure there's nothing active still. This thing performs a lot better, and we'll get this back to our customer. Well, we found the problem. Luckily, this one wasn't too hard. However, using basic, you know, methods, I was able to find the problem regardless of whether I had a scanner or not. A big issue we have nowadays is a lot of mechanics don't know how to think outside the box. So if the scanner isn't showing them check engine codes, for some reason they haven't been trained on using their eyeballs and actually looking around to see if there's anything obvious. So most of what I do, as you guys know, are mechanical engines. In fact, I work on a lot of antiques. I work on a lot of, you know, 70s, 80s, 90s engines. And lately, I haven't worked on that many, you know, electronic engines. In fact, it's been years since I've really had to hook up a scanner and pay attention to live data in general. So this brings up a really good point where, you know, I was able to solve the problem, and yes, I happen to have a scanner. Even though I'm not an automotive shop, I actually bought that scanner to be able to take care of my own vehicles and deal with my own problems, because in the past, I've also had some weird issues where mechanic shops don't want to deal with it because there's no check engine codes or no issues. And so there's times where, you know, I need to take care of my own stuff, or I don't have the time to send it out. And that's where that scanner, you know, kind of pays for itself in me keeping my own stuff running. A couple friends, you know, they swing by with their Sprinter vans. I have a variety of friends with the diesel camper vans, and, you know, they're all kind of the same. They all come apart the same. And yes, since I used to work on, you know, semi-trucks, heavy trucks, and way back when I worked on automotive, you know, I know enough to be dangerous and get back into it. However, you wouldn't want me working on your car day to day, because, you know, the technology has moved forward so much that even I'm way out of date. You know, I simply know enough to be dangerous, and I'm sure, you know, with the most modern cars nowadays, it would take some hard thinking to really come up with a solution, because I don't understand all the new electronics and stuff like that. That being said, having a basic understanding of systems on an engine, so in today's case, the turbo, you know, a turbo is kind of the same whether it's a mechanical engine or not. The difference between an automotive application and like most boats that I see is the sensors. You're gonna have check engine codes most likely. Usually if there's an actual turbo or charge air issue, you're going to have physical symptoms like what we saw. We actually heard it and saw it. And, you know, like in that case, you can actually reverse engineer it. You know, like, so the second I heard it and confirmed the complaint, there was a lack of power. It's like, oh yeah, there's a lack of power. You know, what would cause that? Well, yes, a mass airflow sensor could cause that, but probably not to the degree. And usually mass airflow sensors don't make noise when they go bad. So that's kind of what led me towards the turbo boost issue. Plus, you know, like one of the first codes that I saw was a low boost code. And things like the mass airflow sensor stuff, usually are related to that. So I'm going to go after the turbo issues first, and then a lot of times the other codes clear up as a result. So if you can think your way through whatever system might be having an issue, think through the symptoms that you're having, then suddenly the scanner isn't quite as critical. You know, it's nice to be able to graph the data and see what it's doing. However, in today's application, even if I didn't have the scanner, I don't know that it would have helped me that much. You know, I still would have gone through the same process. I just would have done it like I was on a boat. I would have, you know, like still physically inspected everything. And if it wasn't blatantly obvious, I would have just dug deeper and deeper until I saw the problem. And so, you know, that's kind of what you have to do on a boat, because a lot of times we don't have the live data. Unless you guys are on, you know, like a larger yacht with maybe electronic engines. In that case, you can't plug in an OBD2 scanner like what I was using today. You actually have to have a laptop with software. And I do have some of that on my laptop that's in the truck. However, it's very rare when I use it. The expense to keep that stuff up to date is just astronomical, and I don't do enough engines where it really makes that much of a difference. So for the most part, I stick to mechanical systems with an electronic engine every once in a while here and there. Understanding those systems is good, right? So my experience as a truck mechanic was really valuable in terms of helping me understand what the computers are paying attention to, how the sensors work, you know, like what is signal voltage, what kind of voltage are we dealing with, what does a graph of a normal working sensor look like. That sort of stuff was very, very helpful. And if you've gone to diesel school, you're going to learn that, because the world now is mostly electronic. The boating world is still mostly mechanical, including on some of the larger ships. Not everything though. And, you know, like, a lot of times once you get into the bigger and bigger boats, you almost need dealer access to do a lot of the things on there. So for example, you know, when I did work for Cummins, you know, I had dealer software that I could come in and, you know, program things like injectors, you know, tell the computer that the turbo, you know, was installed or something like that. That, you know, unless you're paying for the software, you're just not going to have access to do that. So you can still do the physical nuts and bolts stuff, but you can't necessarily reprogram things or reflash a computer or something like that. The shops that, you know, invest in that software, the vast majority of what they're doing needs that software. For me, since most of what I'm doing is mechanical, I'm not going to pay thousands of dollars a year for each manufacturer. That would be insane. I'd be broke, because it's not cheap even to rent that software. And yes, that's billable to the customer. However, you know, I just don't do enough of it to justify having all the software, at least right now. The future may bring more electronic engines my way, but as of right now, you know, I really don't touch the laptop or my scanner very much. It's kind of nice. There's also, you know, a huge lack of understanding of the mechanical side of things. So a lot of, you know, modern automotive and truck shops, the younger people, especially my age or younger, they don't know what to do if it's a mechanical engine. And I've watched this happen in live time, where I've watched techs throw every part at the engine because there wasn't a check engine code. They were just guessing. They had no idea how to even get started because they don't know how to look, listen, feel, you know, listen to the customer, confirm what the customer is actually saying. You know, did they take the truck out and drive it? Are they taking the boat out and actually like trying to recreate the issue? A lot of shops don't do that. They simply plug in the computer, and if the computer doesn't say anything, their brains melt. So that's kind of a frustrating aspect of the mechanic world, where, you know, being able to kind of work on both sides is good. In fact, you know, like, it can really be kind of the best way to go about things, where, you know, you old school mechanics, you got to embrace the new school stuff once in a while. However, you know, the new school guys, they got to embrace the old school stuff too. And for me, you know, I feel like I've fallen behind where, you know, the trucking world has long since moved on without me. The automotive world has long since moved on without me. However, I still know enough to like look up the correct resources, reach out to a friend who does work in the industry or something, you know, have at least enough of the basic tools to like get started. And if it really is out of my hands, then not having a problem just handing it forward to somebody who knows how to tackle it. So this particular issue, yeah, it happened to be simple, but most of the diagnostics was done on a mechanical platform despite the scanner being in the vehicle. Well, as always, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you learned something today. I will plan on seeing you guys next week. If you like what you saw, leave a comment, leave a suggestion. I'm always looking for ideas. And thank you guys so much for watching.